My child does not encounter similar problems when he enters public school. However, I have heard from Hindu children and teenagers in the school system now that they have to face these similar types of errors, and many of them have been subjected to bullying as a result. For example, last year, a 6th grader in the greater Houston area was subjected to bullying after a class that discussed in a highly skewed manner the pollution levels in the Ganges River, a river that is sacred to Hindus, that he had birth defects, and that he was dirty and needed to be cleaned up.
Later on, he was physically attacked by a few other students and was held down while his eyebrow was shaved off with a razor. As distressing as that situation was, you can imagine my surprise to find out that the high school world geography materials submitted by Edmentum replicate some of the same exact problems in their presentation of the pollution levels in the Ganges River, with inaccuracies that are likely to cause problems for Hindu students in the classroom. This is just one example of the inaccurate information we at the Hindu American Foundation have found in our reviews. We ask you, as the elected representatives that guide our great state's educational system, to make sure that the publishers fulfill their obligation to provide accurate materials so that students in the future receive accurate information and bullying is not enabled otherwise. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Sir, I'll let Mr. Bradley off the hook this time, but do you have specific examples and publishers?
We submitted in the public comment process.
Okay, perfect.
And I believe we found about 122 factual errors.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Questions? All right, thank you so much.
Celina Moreno, followed by John Noble, followed by James Carnero.
Good afternoon. My name is Celina Moreno, and I'm an attorney with MALDEF. We're concerned about several proposed inclusions and omissions to the Social Security's textbooks that present an inaccurate or incomplete account of our history and society. I'd like today to discuss 2 examples. Number 1, Pearson's U.S. government textbook contains 2 offensive and intellectually dishonest cartoons on affirmative action. First, the other beneficiaries of affirmative action, most commonly thought to be women and racial and ethnic minorities, as non-human and foreign to the point of depicting them as space aliens. The cartoon almost implies that simply because they're others, they'll benefit from affirmative action regardless of merit. It oversimplifies without explaining what affirmative action really means or offsetting it with other portrayals. And contrary to the assertion that support for affirmative action is waning, the U.S. Supreme Court just last year in a 7-1 decision upheld as a compelling state interest the consideration of race as a limited factor in university admissions and opined about its benefits. Simply put, we should not be othering are inappropriate, inaccurate, and far from funny. They should be removed.
The second thing I'd like to discuss today are the world geography textbooks, which omit a key part of Latin American history by omitting accounts of resistance by indigenous people against forced religious conversion to Christianity. The state would do a disservice to Latino students, most who have mixed roots, including Spanish and indigenous ones, by omitting the central component to understanding Latino and particularly in Texas, Mexican American history and identity. Moreover, all students should be exposed to texts that discuss key parts of the history of Latinos, who comprise the majority of all Texas students. Distorted submissions by Discovery Education, Pearson, and Houghton Mifflin discuss the spread of Christianity among the indigenous in the Americas without an accurate portrayal of the history of bloodshed and resistance behind that conversion. I just want to end by thanking the board for this opportunity and urging the board not to adopt the text without needed supplementation and accurate portrayals. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Celina. Mr. Bradley.
As I often do, since my colleague is out of the room, I'll speak for him. That was a joke, by the way. I rarely ever speak for David Bradley.
True.
Do you have a list of specifics that you're going to submit or have submitted on? You mentioned a couple in your remarks, but are there other specific textbooks or specific sections that you would like us to address?
Aside from the Pearson U.S.
yeah.
government and then the Pearson Houghton
Right.
Mifflin and the Discovery Education textbooks, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, if you have any, the key part of this process being as detailed as possible is to get written comments that can then be forwarded to the publishers so they can address those specifics.
Sure, and I can do that now as well if you'd like.
Or if you want to just turn it in, I think staff is going to take all these and farm them out to the publishers that those comments pertain to.
Okay, is there Is there a certain deadline that I need to do that by? I don't have comments written out, but I'd be happy to write those out for you.
Monica, what is the deadline for concerns to be filed with the agency?
Well, if an individual identifies an error, that could be reported at any point in time. If an error is identified, for example, after you adopt the instructional materials, then that's when you have the ability to look at fines.
Right.
So,
But if they wanted to get it in before we get the October 8th report, to hopefully get them fixed before we go to print, or before they go to print, or whatever.
so I believe we had a deadline that passed that we've already sent that information forward, September 5th. So that was the deadline that we had for public comment. We've already sent all of those comments that were received to the publishers, and that's what they'll be responding to by next month.
Okay, hold on. Let's press the pause button here. So the report we're going to get on the 8th is not going to include anything we're hearing today?
So you've got language in your rule, and I apologize, I don't know these rules like I know Chapter
Sure.
74.
Sure.
But it's my understanding that you've got language in your administrative rule that addresses public comment. The public comment deadline was September 5th. When we're talking about identification of factual errors, your rules include processes for those errors to be identified at any point in time.
Okay, so there is no deadline for issues that we're hearing about today.
Well,
I mean,
Right.
we want them to be done before the books are in the classroom, obviously, but it's,
Yeah.
and the
Well-
earlier the better.
Right. I think anyone who's interested in getting a particular concern addressed by a publisher needs to get that to the publisher as soon as possible. Obviously, publishers need to be able to address those issues before you take action in November.
So, Madam Chair, if you would permit me to express a nudge to the publishers that things we're hearing today, we would sure like to see on that October report so we can know that these things are being looked at, because none of us want errors in the classroom. We want to fix them now before they arrive in the classroom. So anything that can be done to address what we're hearing today would be appreciated by me individually. Anybody else is free to express their opinion, but thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair. All right. Let's see, I have Ms. Knight, and then I'll write Dr. Dominguez.
Did you have copies of your testimony?
I'd be happy to submit written testimony. I didn't submit written testimony.
That would kind of speed up the process in terms of
Absolutely.
what the issue was. But I wanted to follow up on the statement. I'm not quite understanding now. You say get them to the publisher. So are you saying going outside of TEA sending the comments to the publisher and going directly to the publisher? Now, Monica, I'm not quite following that last statement.
Mrs. Knight, certainly if comments come into the agency, then we will do our best to facilitate that. As I understand it, the rules allowed for public comment to be received through September 5th. And then there's an expectation in rule that we get those comments to the publishers. We have done that. We have also provided you with those comments. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And they're in the process of looking at those and responding to them. So I think we're a little bit unsure of the expectations for the agency's rule, since that deadline that is in your rules has already passed.
Right. Okay, I'm following you. All those email ones that we got going to the publishers, anything after, anything today and afterwards, would the individual need to send it to the publisher themselves, or do they need to send the information to you to send to the publisher?
If they send it to us, we can certainly forward that on. I don't know that we can hold them to that same expectation of responding by the same
Right. I
deadline,
got you.
because that's already passed. And so I think we're in some unfamiliar territory. You have received many more comments
Right.
than we're used to. And so we're trying to figure out how we can adjust and support the process in the best way that we can.
And I mentioned earlier, I know we have a lot of publishers in the audience, so hopefully they're taking notes and all of that. But I think it would help if, maybe if we sent any emails that come in, if we went ahead and sent those in, it would help the public probably.
Right. Plus, this is, what is it? The audio, so they can always listen to
That's right.
to the tape
They sure can.
of this meeting. The publishers, I mean.
Okay. Dr. Dominguez?
My comments were going to be along the same line to Monica. Since the deadline has passed, maybe would it be more advantageous for all of our constituents to submit to TEA and then forward it to? Would that help them to be able to listen to these comments, or rather than individual?
Dr. Dominguez, I think that's really a question for the publishers, whether it's easier for them to receive that from us or whether it's easier for them to receive that feedback directly. As I said, we're happy to try to facilitate the process in any way we can.
And who would ask the publishers?
Well, if they're publishers sitting out in the audience, maybe at the next break, could get some guidance on that. Okay, Mr. Maynard?
Thank you.
You know, this is my second time through this process, and so I would still probably have a rookie status. So forgive my ignorance, but if Ms. Martinez, if the public comment time is passed and we're not accepting any public comment or input, what are we doing here? I mean that's kind of. Can I ask that question?
The publishers are still accepting it. It's just we're asking the agency to also send the comments on, but the publishers are obviously here accepting comment.
Right.
That is, yeah.
But ultimately, you know, I just want to make sure, because here's the thing: is that the good folks that have signed up here need to understand, they need to know
Right.
that their input is valued and it is going to be used and it's going to be considered. And can we ensure that in fact is the case?
So, Mr. Maynard, Chapter 66.60, these are your rules.
Right.
And this is what I am basing my responses on. We have followed the rules that you have adopted for written public comment. You've got information in here also on public hearings. Certainly, if there is a different process that the board would like to follow with respect to all of this public comment, we can certainly bring your rules back so that you can amend them and provide us with that direction. It's really based on your rules and not
Sure.
an agency process.
I got that, and by the way, Ms. Martinez, is that, you know, that's not my question is not a criticism, but based on the ongoing conversation that I'm hearing here is that it certainly gives the folks out here in the audience the impression that they're wasting their time, and we don't want to waste anybody's time. But okay, thank you.
But staff has agreed to send their comments on for now, so thank you. And then we can maybe take a look at the language. So,
Madam Chair?
Ms. Martinez?
Sorry, just staff has informed me, just so that everyone is aware, that any feedback or responses to any comments that we receive from publishers by September 30th can be included in that October report. Anything that we receive from publishers after that, we would not be able to include. So if a publisher receives a comment today or tomorrow or next week and they provide us with those responses by September 30th, then we can include them in the report.
So that is the homework deadline.
September 30.
All right, gotcha.
Okay. Ms. Perez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Then I just have a quick follow-up to Mr. Maynard's question. I appreciate you bringing up that concern. That's a concern of mine as well. And so I guess my question, and I'm not sure if this would be directed to you, Madam Chair, to staff, what do we need to do to make this an agenda item? Because I think we need to look at this process. I think that it's important. Today we're acknowledging out loud that we want to give some added significance to the individuals who've taken their time to come today. But I think that moving that public comment hearing, at least the public hearing, to before the time that deadline, before that deadline is set, I think would be really important. So do we need to have an agenda item on the next,
Staff and I can certainly look at it, but it wouldn't be this meeting. It'd have to be the next meeting.
right, I understand. I just want to make sure that we move on this because I think it's really important to, if we need to review this process, then we need to move quickly.
I would just clarify that your rulemaking does require you to go through first reading, public comment, and second reading, and so you would not be able to take action on your rules that would allow any changes before you need to adopt these instructional materials. So the next proclamation that would impact would be Proclamation 2017.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification, but
Okay.
so that we can correct this issue for the future, I think we need to get started immediately.
Okay. And thank you to staff for clarifying. I know I mentioned earlier that sometimes staff is having to clarify a few process questions for us, which will help us tomorrow, but let's get back to listening to our public who is here patiently waiting. So any other questions for Celina? All right, thank you very much.
John Noble, followed by James Carnero, and then Jonathan Sines.
Good afternoon. I'm John Noble. I'm in Houston, Texas. I have read reviewed 4 books thus far. One was a mock review during the early process just to get the hang of it. Back in 2003, I reviewed the World Geography, McDougall-Littell, and I was appalled at what I found there, but it got worse as I continued. My next book was the Admentum, and that one is beyond hope. There's just nothing, there's just too much editing that would have to be done. I would strongly recommend that be eliminated as a consideration for publication.
Sir, they have withdrawn from the process, so.
I'm sorry?
They've withdrawn from the review process, Admentum, so
Okay.
FYI.
All right. You folks are the 2014 Defenders of the Alamo, as goes Texas, so goes the nation. Everybody's looking at you and their decisions. I would strongly urge you to vote for Ken Mercer's resolution. We need to stop the train wreck before it happens. APUSH needs to be held to TEAC standards.
Sir, we're talking about, the public hearing today is on textbooks, the content in the textbooks. The APUSH discussion is Friday, so we're not posted to talk about that today.
Okay.
Do you have some comments on the textbooks? The history textbooks?
Okay. Well, I have...
Sorry, I know it's confusing, but that's today.
Okay. Today, there's less freedom to express ourselves regarding especially Islam. We have a lot of departments in the federal system now that are funded by tax dollars. They're totally unconstitutional. The addendum A is a list of 5 pages, 12-point type of many of these, and they all need to be eliminated because it's pushing an agenda that is un-American. It is disdains our Christian, Judeo-Christian heritage, and it is destructive of our nation. We're going to, if you feel oppressed by making public comments or standing for Judeo-Christian values, it's because of the oppression, the co-opting that the federal government is currently involved in with regard to the introduction of Sharia law and the Marxist principles that we see.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Mercer, Mr. Allen?
Just to make sure, the Admentum, you said World Geography is withdrawn?
They withdrew in August. Staff just gave me a list of publishers that have withdrawn.
Well, John, I just want to thank you again because you're an addendum on that book, which was withdrawn, but it has a lot of, again, the same kind of thing, chapter, verse, where was that, what the problem was, and I'm just, I guess, thankful that the publisher has withdrawn.
That doesn't mean they won't try to sell their books in Texas. They just took themselves out of the out of this review process.
Out of the review process, so they won't be on our list, but
right.
So superintendent can still buy the book. I see.
Right. SB6. All right, Mr. Allen.
John, you spoke earlier about a lot of influences coming from individuals of the Islamic faith, whether it be owners of textbook companies or whatever. So are you saying that in the state of Texas we should only look at textbooks that are produced by those who are of the Judeo-Christian faith, or have any influence? If it has any outside influence other than that, it should not even be considered?
The history of Islam speaks for itself. It's been responsible for the deaths of over 270 million human beings over its last 1,400 years. We have the statements by John Quincy Adams and Winston Churchill on the subject.